Hello, and welcome to The Only Sane Man by General Zero. Today, we will be reading Chapter 3, Admantine and Admancy. Please be prepared for an explicit ableist slur that occurs within the chapter. Thank you, and have a wonderful time listening. 3 days after Day's last call, Garthan got kidnapped. In a way, it wasn't surprising, because Garthan did leave his house, even though he swore he wouldn't. Vikiri, a long-time contractor for Novacor, and, Garthan supposed, somewhat of an old friend, Day would call her a friend, was unveiling her latest destroyer design and had invited him to the insider's tour before the press ceremony. Vikiri's ships were always excellent, and Garthan accepted, even though it meant he would have to socialize, and with former Novacor colleagues. As a veteran, he had a perfect right to wear his uniform, and he did, scowling at anyone who looked surprised to see him. Vikiri was a very bubbly, but also very thoughtful woman, who immediately steered him away from the Novacor delegation for a private tour of the ship, the Admantine, she called it. It was gorgeous. It was beyond gorgeous. Garthan got lost in examining the controls, imagining that delicate maneuvers and speeds he could pull off with a ship like this. Vikiri put a hand on his arm, the right one, and warned him not to fly off before leaving to socialize with the others. A moment later, there was another hand on his arm, his left arm, the wrong arm, and Garthan jerked around. "What a pleasant surprise to see you here, Denarian," said Centurion Corral. One thing, perhaps the only thing, about retirement that was good was that Garthan was no longer required to be polite to Centurion Corral. "Not so pleasant on my part." Corral ignored him. "The Admantine's a darling, isn't she? My battalion will be testing her. Novacor has an exclusive contract. If she performs well, the line won't be available for civilian use for years." The message was clear. Garthan would never, ever come close to flying one, because he was now a civilian. Well, if Corral wanted to be an a-hole, Garthan could give as well as he got. "Then you had better ask Vikiri to install stronger auto-nave software. Wouldn't want you to get lost again and have to be rescued by someone." The someone in question had been Garthan, quite a few years ago, when Corral was still on their way up the political ladder and had made a stupid decision that killed quite a few of the corpsmen under their command. The fallout had been unpleasant. Corral's polite smile finally soured. They turned to leave, pausing to pat Garthan's wrong arm again. "You know, I wonder if we'd had ships like the Adamantine for the battle, if the casualties would have been lower. It's such a pity that no one from your battalion came back alive and whole." If Garthan hadn't frozen in shock, he might have killed Corral on the spot. Instead, Corral swept away, leaving Garthan to sort through an explosion of guilt and fury. Garthan suddenly found that he couldn't spend one more moment in that place. He left without saying goodbye to Vikiri, storming past the cab he'd come in and taking the pedestrian lanes back to his flat, barely aware of his surroundings. How dare— The lights were already on in his flat. Garthan switched off his anger automatically and fell into battle mode. His eyes darted around what was visible of his apartment from the doorway, unable to discern any changes to it. His gun, which technically didn't exist because he was a civilian and owning a deadly weapon was illegal, was in his bedroom, on the other side of the flat. It was too risky to try and get it. The flat was too old to have a standard-issue panic button by the door, while in Novacor he'd never needed it enough to install one. Garthan's mobile, he realized with chagrin, was back in the cab he had forgotten. A tactical retreat, then. There was a public police terminal on the street below. Garthan took one step back from the doorway into the hall, and felt the tip of a gun jab his back. "Wrong way, Denarian." The voice was familiar, but unplaceable. Garthan raised his hand slowly, subtly putting his elbows in a good position for jabbing. Backwards. "Where are we going, then?" His ambusher gave him a nudge with the gun, and he stepped into his flat and allowed himself to be herded down the hall towards the main room. There were 2 or 3 mismatching photo frames on the wall, the old-fashioned kind with glass in them. Garthen cocked his head subtly to catch the reflection of his attacker in them as he passed. The person behind him was Gamora, former assassin of Thanos, current member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and the absolute last person Garthen ever expected to see in his flat. Garthen spun around to face her. "What are you doing in my apartment?" Gamora rolled her eyes and lowered her weapon. A DX-40 vaporizer, automatic, illegal in Xandar, Garthen noted. But she did not pocket it. "You're being kidnapped. Peter's idea. He's in the living room. Humor him so we can get this idiotic mission over with." Peter Quill was in his living room. Gamora was in his hallway. Garthen had a sinking feeling that the rest of them were in his flat too. And a moment later, his fears were confirmed, as he nearly tripped over Rocket. "Watch your dumbass feet! I mean, come on! Here I am, gonna tell ya, I was glad to see you alive and shit, and you step on me? Look, I kinda got bored waiting for you to show up, so I modified your food replicator into an ion sequencer. Hope you don't mind. Actually, I lied. Don't really care if you mind." "He also made it explode," Gamora said dryly from behind Garthen. "That part was totally accidental and definitely Groot's fault." The plantoid in question stuck his head in the hallway, looking for some reason much shorter than Saul remembered from its arrest file. "I am Groot." "It was too," Rocket countered. Garthen glared at the three of them. "Why are you in my apartment?" Rocket grinned up at him. "We're kidnapping you. Didn't Day tell you what was up?" Day! This, whatever the hell this was Day's newest little adventure. Oh, the man was going to be in for it when Garthen got hold of him, which would be as soon as he got the idiots of the galaxy out of his apartment. "Get out of my way," Garthen snapped. He pushed past Rocket and Groot into the main room of his flat. It was cookie-cutter flat, with an open kitchen unit in the back, the living room lowered into the floor, which had given Garthen hell when he was first relearning how to walk, and a floor-to-ceiling window with a programmable view on the other side. Garthen barely spared a glance for the kitchen, confident that would probably need replacing en masse, and Drax, who was playing with the window intently, and located Quill, who was sitting on the sofa with his shoes on the cushions. Quill grinned widely at Garthen. "Hey, Saul, how's it hanging? Nice place you got. How come there's nothing to drink in here?" There were so many things wrong with the picture before Garthen that he ended up focusing on the one that was least complicated. "Get your feet off the sofa." Quill made a face but complied. He then bounced to his feet and seemed prepared to start one of his ridiculous speeches. "Saul, today is your lucky day." "Why are you in my apartment?" Garthen interrupted. Peter switched tracks. Well, we're doing this hero thing, like we do now as heroes, and we need a bit of a hand, just a quick favor, really, from Nova Corps." Gamora harumphed and crossed her arms, displaying her disagreement with the idea as passively aggressively as possible. "And they told you I'd be willing to help," Garthen said, turning on the expression he used to make cocky recruits apply for transfers. It seemed to work. Slightly. Quill nodded. Rocket piped up to clarify. "Actually, he said you'd throw a fit if we asked you, so we're cutting out that part by just kidnapping you." "Nicely," Quill corrected hastily. "We're kidnapping you nicely." Garthen reminded himself to breathe and tried not to be astounded by the idiocy of the outlaws who had somehow managed to help save Xandar. Garthen never raised his voice, even when he was angry. He rarely had to in order to intimidate people, but even he was approaching his limit here. "I'm not going anywhere. Tell Day to stop meddling. I'm not interested in any more of his little adventures, especially ones that involve babysitting the idiots of the galaxy. Now, get out of my fucking apartment." "Oh, what a mouth you got on me. I'm so scared." "Don't mock me, Rocket. 4 of you are currently carrying illegal weapons, and I bet whatever rust bucket you flew in is stolen. If you don't leave, I'll have you arrested." Quill frowned, and his eyes darted to each of his companions before he made a quick motion to Drax. Gamora was still seeping disapproval, and Rocket had bristled at Garthen's threat. Garthen hoped that they would decide to retreat after all. "See, here's the thing," Quill told Garthen. "We got a plan, and it requires us to kidnap you. We'd like to do it nicely. Since we're good guys now." "No." Quill shrugged, as if to show he was helpless to change the situation. "Well, in that case, I gotta break it to ya. We're kinda still on the fence about the good guy thing, so we just won't do it nicely." At which point Drax appeared next to Garthon and knocked him solidly in the skull. Thank you for joining us for Chapter 3, Admantine and Admancy. Next time, we will be reading Chapter 4, Anesthesia. Thank you for listening. This has been The Only Sane Man by General Z.